Welcome to Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, the show that is dedicated to the relentless pursuit of building a more perfect man. I am your host, your favorite blogger turned podcaster. My name is Rob. And contrary to popular belief, I am more than just another white guy with a podcast. On today's episode, we're going to discuss what I call the 100% policy and what I mean when I say no more breadcrumbs. Stay tuned, it should be a hoot. So today actually marks my bold return to the world of podcasting. Technically, this is the season premiere of season 2 of my show. Granted, there was about a 2-year hiatus between seasons 1 and season 2. But, that also works for some of the television shows that were on during the COVID lockdown. So I figure if a show like Star Trek Strange New Worlds can go 2 years between seasons, I think this rinky-dink little podcast can as well. There are going to be some changes going forward. In the past, my episodes usually ran 20, 25, 30 minutes. I was trying to push north of 30. My target goal was somewhere around 1 hour. And basically, those episodes were extended editions of blog entries that I had written. Kind of director's cuts where I kind of expounded upon some of the stories I would tell and things of that nature. For this season, we're going to go leaner, a little bit meaner. Well, technically not meaner. One of the tenets that I've been writing about going forward has been this notion of being strong enough to be gentle, but saying leaner and gentler just sounds kind of stupid. The point being, show is going to be a little bit easier to swallow, whether you're getting on your morning commute or your drive home from work, or if you're getting on the treadmill, or if you're just doing some chores around the house and you need some background noise. You can think of this podcast as your companion along the way. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to convince yourself that a little bit of something is better than nothing at all? I used to be the king of making it work. Someone would give me just a tiny little bit of their time, a shred of validation, or just enough effort to keep me from walking away. I call those little things breadcrumbs. They aren't the meal, they're just a trail that keeps you following someone else's path. For a long time, I thought that accepting those breadcrumbs was a sign of my patience. I thought I showed I was plugging along or being gentle. I thought I was being the nice guy, the sweet guy, the good guy. But recently I had an epiphany. By settling for those breadcrumbs, I was accidentally telling the world and myself that I didn't deserve the whole loaf. So today I want to talk about why we stop settling and how we move toward what I call the 100% policy. So what is this 100% policy you keep hearing about? It sounds pretty intense, right? Almost audacious. But it's actually the simplest boundary I've ever set. The policy is this. If it isn't a yes, it's a no. If it isn't a hell yeah, it's a no. If it isn't a fuck yeah, it's a no. If I have to spend my weekend wondering where I stand with a friend, with a job, with a project, or with a potential would-be romantic partner, then I already have my answer. If I'm the only one pouring energy into a situation while the other side just watches, that's a breadcrumb. And the 100% policy says that I don't eat those anymore. I used to worry that being this firm was being mean or being too much. Didn't want to be the mean guy. Didn't want to be thought of as aggressive. But I've learned that there is a massive strength in gentleness when that gentleness is applied to yourself. One of the most important lessons I've learned in life over the last few years is that every now and then we have to be selfish. We have to think about ourselves. You see, setting a boundary isn't about building a wall to keep people out. It's about building a floor so that you have a solid place to stand. When you stop bending over to pick up those said breadcrumbs, you finally have the chance to stand up straight. And when you stand up straight, you can finally see the horizon. Okay, kids, gather round. It's time for story time with Uncle Rob. Today I'm telling you about a relationship where I settled for breadcrumbs until the day I finally chose myself. If you follow the blog, you know her as Jessica. I remember driving to her house for the first time, feeling like Daniel LaRusso in The Karate Kid, looking up at her house at the top of the hill and wondering what the hell I was doing there. I felt lucky just to be invited in. For 6 months, I lived in Jessica's world, her movies, her restaurants, her hobbies. She was from a world of wealth and business legacy I'd only heard about as a kid. She'd even told me once, when my parents pass away, I stand to inherit a few $1,000,000. I realized I could have stayed. I could have been a kept man. But Jessica wasn't looking for a partner. She wanted a passenger. She wanted someone who would just go with the flow. I was becoming a piece of clay she could mold into her ideal accessory. The end didn't happen in a mansion. It happened in a freezing parking garage. After an out-of-town trip, we found my car smelled horrific because of some food that Kid 2 had left behind a few days before. Instead of laughing it off or sticking it out, Jessica bailed. She called a neighbor to pick her up, rather than sit in that car with me for 20 minutes. We sat on a concrete bench in silence, waiting for her ride. I realized then that her long haul didn't cover minor inconveniences. The next day, I did something I had never done in my life. I called it off. I didn't wait for her to leave. I chose to walk away from the millions and the big house in the very affluent suburb. I chose the stinky car and my own dignity. It was the first time I ever directly initiated a breakup, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. So the question remains, why do we do it? Why do we settle for breadcrumbs like that? We've all been the Rob in that garage at some point. We've all made what I call compromises with a capital C. Not the small stuff, but the kind of compromises where you shortchange your soul because you don't think that you deserve to be your 100% authentic self. Looking back, I was complicit in being that piece of clay. I let myself be molded because I thought that that was the price of admission to the life that she had. But eventually, that clay hardens, and you realize you become a shape that just doesn't fit your own soul anymore. Ending it was terrifying. It felt like learning to ride a bike for the first time as an adult. It's a lot harder to find your balance when you're older, and the ground feels a lot further away. You're afraid that if you let go of the breadcrumbs, you're going to starve. But that's the trap. The epiphany came when I realized that being alone in that freezing garage felt more like home than being her project ever did. That's the 100% policy in action. I realized that 100% of my own peace, even if it's quiet, even if it's lonely, is worth infinitely more than a $1 million life where I have to stay silent. This episode of Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, was produced, edited, written, and hosted by yours truly, your favorite blogger, a guy named Rob. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I'm well aware that, like me, you have a ton of podcast listening options, so I'm honored that you decided to take a little bit of time out of your day to spend with me. Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, is available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Of course, you probably figured that out already, or else you wouldn't be listening to me now. If you're interested in more insight into this perfectly ordinary, non-gun-owning white guy, be sure to check out my blog, rebuildingrob.com. So until next time, this is Rob reminding you to be audacious, be bold, be brave, be strong enough to be gentle, and remember, the rebuild never ends. Bye, everybody.